The sun rose cruel that morning, no warmth in its gold, only clarity. Dust hung in the air like breath that wouldn't leave the body. A lone wagon creaked outside the Holt farmhouse, its wheels cracked, its boards gray as bone. And beside it stood a woman with her hands folded neatly in front of her skirt, as if good posture could preserve her dignity. She wore no coat, no shawl, just the plain homespun dress she'd been married in, what felt like a lifetime ago. Her name was Etta May Caldwell, and she had been a wife. Now she was nothing, not even welcome kin. You think a woman with a womb like dried kindling deserves my roof? Adeline Holt spat near Etta's boots, her sharp voice slicing the morning quiet. You couldn't give my son an heir. What do you think you're owed now that he's buried? Etta didn't flinch. Not at the words, not at the way her trunk was tossed into the wagon like dead weight. She stood with her chin high and her eyes lowered, not to hide but to contain. Sometimes grief must be bottled so tightly it becomes something else entirely, something you carry until it changes shape. A pair of boots crunched nearby. Deputy Leach leaned against the gate, arms folded. He smelled like dried tobacco and sweat, and his eyes lingered too long on Etta's waist. So she's up for claim then? No papers needed. Adeline didn't even look at him. She ain't livestock, just no longer mine. Etta spoke then, quiet as a prairie wind before a storm. He was your son. You should remember what it means to grieve. Adeline's jaw stiffened. You don't get to mourn. Not after wasting his name. That's when Boone Thatcher came riding in. His horse was mud-splattered, his coat the color of old wheat, and slung against his chest, wrapped in worn blankets, were two squirming bundles. A girl and a boy, 6 months old, born of sorrow and silence. Boone's face was unreadable, sun-bitten and grave. But when he slowed his horse beside the wagon, his eyes went to Etta. Not in hunger, not in pity, just awareness, recognition. Like he'd seen her kind of silence before and knew what it cost. What's the going price for a woman's ruin these days? He asked the deputy. Leach shrugged. She's just standing there. Ain't said she's going nowhere. Boone dismounted, adjusting the babies in his arms. I'm taking her. For the ranch. For the help. And because nobody deserves to be discarded like broken tack. Adeline laughed. She can't cook. She can't clean right. And she's cursed besides. Boone looked at Etta. Her lips parted, just slightly. She hadn't asked for saving, and he wasn't offering salvation. Just shelter. I ain't cursed, she said, voice steady now. Just empty. Boone nodded once. So's the cabin. Suits us both. Gasps murmured from the handful of townsfolk who had wandered over, gossipers and gawkers drawn by the scent of scandal. Mrs. Tilby pressed a hand to her chest like she was watching the earth shift beneath her boots. Deputy Leach chuckled. Well, that's a story they'll pass around for a while. Boone didn't care. He reached out, not touching Etta, just offering space beside the horse. She climbed up wordlessly. The wagon was left behind, trunk forgotten. She held the twins, one on each knee, as they rode off. The prairie stretched endless before them. A flat, golden sea under a sky too wide for comfort. Boone didn't speak for miles. Etta didn't expect him to. But when Huck began to cry, she shifted her shawl and rocked him gently, instinctually, as though the baby were hers. You've held a child before, Boone said quietly. I held dreams. Long enough for them to wither. He said nothing, but he looked at her longer this time. Then, Ella only quiets when someone hums. Etta turned her face toward the wind. Her voice, when it came, was nearly lost in it, a lullaby she hadn't sung in years. Huck settled. Ella yawned. By nightfall, they reached the Thatcher ranch. It wasn't much, just a slumped cabin, a lean-to for the mare, and a fence that leaned like it had given up hope. Boone handed her a blanket and pointed toward the shed. Spare cots in there. I'll bring the babies in with me. Etta nodded. She didn't ask for more. Later that night, Boone stood at the door of the shed, watching her through the slat. She sat with her knees drawn up, the blanket tight around her shoulders. Her face turned toward the stars, not praying, not crying, just waiting, as though the universe might eventually remember her. Before dawn, Boone woke to silence. Huck hadn't cried. He panicked, rushed outside, and there she was, in the cold dew, sitting in the grass with both babies swaddled against her. She was bottle-feeding them, bare hands pink from chill, but smiling just faintly at something neither of them could see. He didn't speak, just watched her for a long while, then turned back into the cabin. It wasn't pity. It wasn't love. But it was the first time in months the babies had fed in peace. And that felt like something holy. He left the door unlatched behind him, just in case she decided to come in on her own. She did. Hours later. Without a word. And no one in town knew, yet, that something had shifted forever. Boone had known silence before. Knew the kind that followed death, the kind that rode shotgun with regret. But now, with Etta in the house and the twins breathing soft on her chest as she rocked them near the fire, it was a different silence. Softer, like the hush that comes before snowfall. Not peace, no, but the absence of chaos. And sometimes that was enough. The cabin wasn't large, but Boone had made space without saying much. He cleared a corner near the hearth, gave her the cot she once used in the shed, and never touched her trunk. She kept to herself, moved like she might vanish if someone looked too long, but her hands stayed busy. Laundry, feeding, warming bottles, patching threadbare sleeves. Boone noticed she never laughed. Not even a little. Even when Huck sneezed so hard he startled himself, or when Ella discovered her toes and stared like they were some holy relic. Etta would smile, tired and soft, but her eyes held something frozen. A part of her still waiting for the door to close again. Boone didn't ask questions. He just made sure the door stayed open. It was Ella who bonded first. The little girl had a stubborn cry, sharp and constant, but the moment Etta picked her up, something shifted. The baby would clutch at Etta's dress, eyes half-lidded, like she'd remembered something from before she was born. Boone noticed it and said nothing, just passed Etta the bottle with a nod. "You've got away," he murmured one afternoon, watching Etta swaddle Huck after a bath. "I don't know how to keep a man," she said, "but I can hold a child." Boone hadn't asked for that truth, but once it was spoken, it stayed hanging in the air between them. Out in town, talk swelled like a summer storm. Boone heard it when he stopped in for nails or feed. Heard Mrs. Tilby whisper loud enough to be overheard. "She's living there now. Full time. Poor man's wife ain't been in the ground a year, and now he's sheltering a barren girl with a bad name." "Not even married her," someone else hissed. "Disgraceful," said a third. Boone didn't respond. He just took his goods and left. But that night, Etta didn't come to the table. He found her on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. The sky above them spread out like an open wound, and the prairie wind howled low and mean. "They're saying you've ruined yourself by keeping me here," she whispered. "I already was," Boone said. "They just needed someone new to point at." Etta turned toward him. "You don't have to defend me." "I ain't." He paused. "I'm defending what's quiet." "That's all you've been, Etta. Quiet." She looked like she might cry. Instead, she stood. "I'll leave if it becomes too much." Boone stared out at the darkness. "Don't." He didn't explain himself. Just walked back inside. The next morning, the wind changed. A cold snap rolled through, biting and sudden. Boone left early to check on fence lines before the cattle wandered too far. Etta stayed behind with the twins, fire going strong, small stew simmering. Then the knock came. Not loud, not hurried, but firm. Etta froze. She lifted Huck and tiptoed toward the door, opening it just a sliver. Deputy Leach stood there, hat off, eyes scanning her figure like he was inspecting a tool. "Afternoon, Miss Caldwell. Thought I might check in. See how you're settling. I don't believe this is your concern." Leach grinned, leaning on the doorframe. "See, that's where you're wrong. Some folks say Boone took what wasn't his. Some say you were never rightfully sold. Now I'm just trying to clear up any confusion." Etta stepped fully into the doorway, holding Huck tight. "I'm not a calf to be bartered." "Then why you living like one?" he sneered. Before she could respond, Ella wailed from inside. Etta didn't move, just held Leech's stare until he shifted uncomfortably. "You best tell Boone I stopped by," he muttered. "Won't be the last time." He turned and left, kicking dust in his wake. That night, Boone found her pacing the floor, jaw clenched. "Leech came. I figured he would. You're going to get in trouble for me." Boone took the kettle off the fire, poured 2 mugs. "I don't scare easy." He made it sound like I was still owned. "You're not. You're not my husband." Boone met her eyes for the first time that night. "Wouldn't matter if I were. They'd still look at you the same." She didn't reply, just held Huck closer. Over the next week, she barely spoke. Focused on the children. Woke before Boone. Cleaned what didn't need cleaning. Mended what wasn't torn. Then the colic came. Huck screamed night after night, body rigid, tiny fists flailing. Etta tried every trick, warm compresses, soft singing, even boiled mint leaves. Boone took shifts walking the floor. He looked worn thin, darker under the eyes, but never raised his voice. One night, the child wouldn't stop. Boone had to saddle the horse before dawn. Etta insisted he rest, but he shook his head. "He's my boy. Can't break just 'cause I'm tired." She watched him carry Huck to the porch and sway side to side in the cold. He stayed out there an hour. When she stepped out with a blanket and fresh bottle, she draped it over his shoulders without a word. He didn't thank her. Didn't need to. Later, while Boone was gone, Mrs. Tilby came up the path. Not knocking, just appearing, like gossip in human form. Etta opened the door. My. You've made yourself quite comfortable," Tilby said with false cheer. "No ring. No papers. Just a widow's name and a man too tired to fight it." Etta let her talk. Didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Then she said, "Did it make you feel better, stepping up here?" Tilby blinked. "Excuse me. Stepping up. Talking down. Does it fill the parts of you that ache?" Tilby turned red. "You watch that tongue, girl." "I've watched my tongue all my life," Etta said. "It's gotten me shame and silence. So maybe it's time I let it speak." Tilby stormed off, muttering. That night, Boone noticed the shift. Etta had her hair down. Not in defiance, but peace. The twins were sleeping early. The stew was warm. The cabin felt fuller. "You all right?" he asked. "I think I remembered something," she replied. "What's that?" "How it feels to choose staying. Not just being allowed to." Boone didn't know how to answer. So he didn't. Just nodded. As the fire dimmed, Ella stirred and fussed. Boone reached for her, but Etta was already moving. She picked up the baby, pressed her to her shoulder, and began to hum. Boone watched her. The sway of her body. The calm in her voice. The light in her eyes. Not joy, not yet, but something less sharp than before. "You were right," he said. "About. They took to you first." Etta smiled, and for the first time, it touched her eyes. Outside, the wind carried whispers from the town. But inside the cabin, for now, there was only breath, warmth, and the fragile beginnings of something neither of them dared to name. Boone had always believed a name meant something. Thatcher, carved into the brand above the gate, passed down by hard men with sunburned hands and stubborn hearts. But as the snowmelt turned the prairie to mud and whispers grew into warnings, he began to wonder if a name could also be a weight, a burden that shaped a man's fate whether he asked for it or not. It started with the letter, folded, yellowed, and slipped into his hand at the general store. No envelope. Just his name written in a familiar, tight script, Adeline Holt. He read it on the porch after dark, the twins already asleep, their tiny breaths misting the window panes. Etta sat at the hearth, mending Boone's shirt, needle flicking like a heartbeat. Boone's brow furrowed as he scanned the paper, then folded it once more and slipped it into the pocket of his coat. He didn't speak. Etta didn't ask. But something cold and unseen passed between them as the flames dipped lower in the stove. The next morning, she found him at the barn sharpening a hatchet with slow, deliberate strokes. "She wants me back," Etta said. Boone didn't turn. "She wants what's owed. Land. Your trunk. Or a reason to make a public scene. She's going to say I was stolen. She already has." Etta stepped into the light slanting between the boards. "You'll be dragged into this." Boone looked up. "I already was. The day I didn't let her sell you to the next man in line." "You still could," Etta said, quieter now. "No shame in undoing a mistake." Boone stood. "You think this," he motioned around the barn, toward the house, toward the warm place she'd carved from cold, "was a mistake?" She didn't answer, just stared at the floor. By midweek, the deputy returned. He arrived in a flurry of hoofbeats and authority, face flushed from liquor and the thrill of being needed. He didn't knock, just walked up to the porch and stood with his thumbs in his belt like a man measuring his own importance. "You knew this was coming," Leach said. Boone stepped onto the porch, wiping his hands with a rag. "I figured you'd come sniffin'." Leach smiled, thin and mocking. "There's talk you claimed what wasn't yours. Took a woman without rights or name. Her kin says she's still theirs. She's not property. Then why'd you treat her like trade?" Boone's voice stayed low. "She walked out on her own. Still." Leach's hand brushed the pistol at his hip. "She's listed as Holt. Ain't legally changed, ain't been married again. And from what I hear, she's raising your children like she's their mother." Boone didn't move. "She is. Funny. I don't recall a ceremony. No preacher. No record." Boone stepped closer. "I don't need a crowd to make something real." Leach chuckled, turning toward the edge of the porch. "A man with a name like yours should know better. Don't matter what's real. Matters what they can twist." He left with a promise. Be in town next week. There'd be a hearing. Not formal, but loud. Meant to scare, not settle. Adeline had called in a favor from the judge's clerk, said she wanted her dignity restored. Said Boone could return the girl quietly or be dragged through public shame. That night, Etta packed. She didn't cry. Didn't explain. Just folded her dresses tight, placed the twins' blankets back in the chest, and stood at the door like a ghost waiting to vanish. Boone found her there, coat draped over her arm, jaw clenched. "I'll make it easier for you," she said. "This was always temporary." He leaned against the frame. "Was it? You don't owe me your name." He studied her face. "I never offered it. You never asked. That's not what held you here. Then what did? The way you hum when you stir stew. The way Ella sleeps against your shoulder. The way Huck only laughs when you clap your hands. That's what held you here, Etta. And it's what'll keep holding." She blinked hard. "They're not mine. Don't matter. They chose you." She set the coat down slowly. A storm rolled in the next day. Hard rain, low skies. Boone left at dawn for town, hat pulled low, coat drawn tight. He didn't ask Etta to come. Didn't want her near that courtroom, near the hungry eyes of townsfolk who didn't understand what grace looked like. He returned after sunset, boots soaked, knuckles bruised. Etta met him at the door, heart pounding. "What happened?" Boone stepped inside, peeled off his coat. "Judge asked why I didn't come sooner. And I told him I was busy keeping children alive while their dead mother slept under stone. Told him Adeline sold you in daylight and now wanted you back because the neighbors were watching." Etta's breath hitched. "What did he say?" Said the law doesn't look kindly on mothers-in-law with ledgers in place of hearts. Case was dropped. Clerk even apologized on her behalf. Etta sat down, knees weak. Boone knelt before her, holding her gaze. "You don't owe anyone shame, Etta. Not anymore." She touched his hand. It trembled. But even as relief filled the room, It didn't last long. A new letter came the next day, this time addressed to Etta. No return. Just 3 lines scrawled in Adeline's tight, furious script. You were never his to keep. Infertile or not, you'll always be empty. The twins will grow. They'll see what you are. Etta read it once. Then again. Then walked to the fire and burned it. Boone watched from the doorway. Said nothing. Later that night, he found her outside with the twins in her arms, both drowsy and warm from milk. The stars above were thick and bright, a river of old light stretching across the heavens. Etta didn't look up, just whispered, I'll never have my own. But maybe that's not the only way to be whole. Boone stepped beside her. Family don't start with blood. Starts with choice. She turned to him, eyes shimmering. I never asked for more children, he said, voice rough. But I reckon I've got 3 now. She looked at him a long time. You want to give me your name? No, Boone said gently. I want to earn yours. Inside, the cabin glowed. The cradle Boone had carved weeks ago, quietly, alone in the barn, sat waiting beside the hearth. He'd lined it with Etta's mended shawl. She hadn't seen it yet. Tomorrow, he'd show her. Tonight, they simply stood under the stars, a man with a broken past and a woman sold twice but still standing. Holding borrowed babies. Holding on to something neither had asked for but both had begun to believe in. Outside, the wind carried the last of Adeline's ash across the prairie. And inside, a name, Etta Mae Caldwell, was whispered by 2 children who would one day call her mama, no matter what the world had once said. The storm rolled in just after dawn. Thick gray clouds flattened the sky, and wind peeled across the plains like it meant to strip the earth clean. Boone rose before the fire had caught and found the barn door swinging. He latched it in silence. Behind him, through the curtain of cold, came a sound too soft for danger but too urgent for comfort, a child's cough. By the time he stepped inside, Etta was already cradling Huck. The boy was warm to the touch, his cheeks flushed deeper than usual. Boone crossed the room, gentle as always, but his jaw had that quiet edge he wore when afraid. He coughed all night, Etta said. Didn't want to wake you. You should have, Boone replied, crouching beside her. I know. They didn't speak more. Just worked in rhythm, Boone stoking the fire higher, Etta wiping Huck down with cool cloths, Ella stirring in her crib but calm, as though she knew her brother needed more today. The wind howled. Outside, the land turned to slush, and the road to town blurred under sleet. By midday, Huck's breathing turned shallow. Boone's hand trembled when he touched the boy's chest. We wait too long, we lose him. I can ride, Etta said instantly. Boone stared at her. You're needed here, Ella. The cattle. She was already gathering her cloak. Boone's face hardened, protective. You'll get lost in that cold. I'd rather be lost than bury another baby. There was no argument after that. She left with Huck pressed to her chest, bundled in quilts, his little hands curled like unopened petals. The mare was skittish in the wind, but Etta held firm. Her hair whipped loose from its braid. The trees blurred past. The snow stung her cheeks. Still, she pushed on. By the time she reached town, she could barely feel her feet. She burst into the doctor's home like a phantom, dress soaked, lips blue. The doctor, an older man named Garrett Yarrow, took one look at her and the child and cleared his table. He's fevered, he said. And you're half frozen yourself. I'll thaw, she whispered. Just fix him. Yarrow worked quick. Boiled water. Brewed mustard poultices. Rubbed Huck's chest with camphor until his cough changed pitch. Etta hovered like a sentry, refusing rest, watching every breath. It was near midnight before the baby slept without wheezing. Etta, still standing, finally sagged against the wall. Her knees gave. She slid to the floor and wept, quiet and crumpled like parchment. Yarrow handed her a mug of warm milk. I've seen you before, he said, sitting beside her. You were married to Ezra Holt's boy. She nodded. They did you wrong. I'm used to it. He studied her. That child, he's not yours by blood, is he? No. But he's yours. She blinked through tears. Yes. Then go home in the morning. While there's still something there waiting. Boone was pacing by the fire when she returned, hair damp, face pale. Ella was sleeping. The stew pot boiled dry. When Etta stepped inside, Huck pressed against her, drowsy but breathing steady. Boone stopped moving. He crossed the room and took the boy from her arms slowly, reverently. Then, without hesitation, he kissed the top of Huck's head, something he hadn't done in weeks. He looked back up at Etta. You rode through a storm for a child that ain't yours. Her voice cracked. They're mine. They were from the minute I fed them. He stared at her a long time. You're not afraid of much, are you? I'm afraid of losing peace. You think we got peace here? We had something close. Boone exhaled sharply. I've been alone so long, I forgot what having someone felt like. Thought I was keeping you safe, keeping you fed. But it's you holding all this together, Etta. Me, the kids, the land. All of it. She shook her head. You've been kind. Kind isn't enough. He reached for something in his coat pocket. She stiffened. It was the cradle shawl. The one she'd lost months ago. Folded and worn soft from his hands. I was going to give it back once I fixed the phrase. But then I figured, maybe you'd want to wrap all three of us in it. She looked down at it. Simple, patched, hers. And somehow more than that. He stepped forward, hesitating just once. Then placed it in her hands. This ain't a proposal, he said, voice thick. I'm not good with words like that. But I'd be a fool to let you keep standing by that door waiting for another woman's name to replace yours. Etta's eyes shimmered. What if I never want another name? Then I'll earn yours. Outside, the wind began to settle. The snow eased into drizzle. Later, with the twins asleep, Boone stood behind her by the fire, his hand resting lightly at her back. She didn't flinch. Didn't lean in either. But she didn't step away. She stayed. In town, the gossip twisted once more. People said the barren girl had taken root. That she'd bewitched the widower with her eyes, her quietness, her strange way of making children love her without asking for it. Some said Boone was soft now. Others said he'd finally healed. No one could agree on whether she'd saved him or if it was the other way around. But at the ranch, they didn't care. Spring came early that year. The cattle survived the thaw. Ella took her first steps barefoot in the dust near the barn. Huck laughed whenever Etta sang. Boone planted sunflowers in the field behind the house, though he never said why. One evening, as the sky turned the color of old whiskey, Etta stepped onto the porch. Boone sat with a baby in each arm, eyes on the horizon. Boone, she said. He looked up. I don't need a ceremony, or a ring, or papers. He said nothing. But if you asked, she whispered, I'd say yes. He stood. Walked to her slowly. Took her hand. Then I'm asking. She didn't cry. But something inside her, something cold, something shut tight for years, melted all the same. That night, as they sat together in the hush between dusk and dark, Etta whispered to the twins, one on each knee. You weren't born of me. But I was born again the moment you needed me. And she meant it. In the silence that followed, Boone kissed her knuckles. She didn't look away. She stayed. And in that quiet, unremarkable house on the edge of the world, a woman who'd been sold for being empty became the center of something whole. Not a mother by blood. Not a wife by law. But chosen. Loved. And finally, truly home. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.